Welcome to another episode of Behind the Pen. This is a series of interviews that author J.T. Ellison, that's her in the other picture there, and I'm Jayne Krentz, are doing with the staff and booksellers at that fabulous bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, The Poisoned Pen. Today, we are excited to interview and chat with Larry Siegel, who is going to tell us and give us more insight into what goes on behind running a big, successful, dynamic bookstore like The Poisoned Pen. So thanks for joining us, Larry. We're really,
you're
really
welcome, but I think I have very little to do with that.
Well, that leads into our first story then. How did you get here? How did you get to this cool gig at The Poisoned Pen?
I've known Barbara for a long time. And when I moved to Arizona, and had retired, and I was looking for something to do, and I found Barnes & Noble up in North Scottsdale, where we lived, and she would come in the store periodically, because whenever she was having an event and ran short of books, she would stop by, and it got to the point where she would call me during the day, and I would go around to the other Barnes & Nobles, because at that point there was like 14 Barnes & Nobles in the valley, and gather up books for her so she could take it to the event and have enough books. So, and we became friends. We even did events together early on. So that's how I got. When Barnes & Noble, I was the manager for community relations, and mostly did business and commercial stuff there. And they wanted me to do more, and I wanted to do less. So I just talked to Barbara one day. We were doing a big event at the hotel, and she came there, and I asked her, if she would be interested for just some part-time work, and she said sure, she'd love to, and we agreed. So I gave Barnes & Noble my notes. Started with the pen right before the pandemic, about a year or so before. So I'm sure that in terms of the success of the pen,
I can tell you that Barbara's excited to have you on board. She's made that
she's a great lady. She really is.
She's excited to take advantage of what she called your unique skills. So what unique skills do you bring, do you think? What is it?
I don't think I had any really unique skills. I've had a very varied career. Started as an accountant and hated that, and wound up at MGM Studios for 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
And that was exciting. And worked for several different executive committees. Did some really interesting things. We were the first people to put movies into hotels. And that was really an interesting project. And but then they wanted me to move to Las Vegas for the hotel, and I didn't want to do that. So I was recruited by a big company out of Chicago, ITW, and was there for a number of years. I wound up running one of their divisions in Connecticut, and went into my own business, and then sold that and moved to to Arizona, to be closer to where my in-laws were who were having trouble. So they weren't doing well. So we came out here because it was closer to Los Angeles than having to move to Los Angeles, which we didn't want to do. So and it happened to be one of the few buildings in that area was Barnes & Noble. So and they rejected me, actually, because it was Christmas. And I figured, well, they must need help at Christmas. And they told me I was overqualified and they weren't going to hire me. I came back the next year, and they all new people, nobody from the previous team there. So they took a chance. And after Christmas, they asked me if I wanted permanent. So, and then every time the community relations, they kept going through people all the time. And every time there was nobody there, I would take over. And finally, they said, "Why don't you just do it, but it's full time?" And I said, "Okay." So I went to full time, and it was fun. I met some interesting people, some interesting friends along the way. But in terms of unique skills, I like a lot of people here, almost everybody here working. I love books, and it's my sister's walking me across a boulevard when I couldn't go by myself to the library, and finding the library and realize, wow, what's this place? And I'm sure a lot of people have the same kind of story. But that's my skill. Like people, I've been in business for a long time, so I have some idea. But,
And maybe some idea of just handling people, dealing with people in the public.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you did have that special time when you were working as a community relations manager, and now there's a lot of events at the Pen. Is that a similar process of setting up events, or how is it different for setting up events at the Pen than what you would?
Strangely enough, the Pen, as I'm sure you know, the author visits are distributed out between in those days, Borders, Barnes and Noble, and Independence. Well, in the Phoenix area, the Independent was Poison Pen, which is 10 minutes away from our Barnes and Noble. And when an event would come in, if it was going to go to Barnes and Noble, they didn't want to be that close to the Scottsdale store, and they would do it up at the Marketplace store. So, but more the events that we did off-site would be where authors would come in to talk to bigger groups, or corporate sales, that kind of thing. And those were, in most cases, business books.
Mm.
So we would provide that, go and sell the books at the event, that kind of thing. So a lot of it was off-site. And then some of the events we did with Barbara at the store. For example, a long time ago, I tried to get Diana Gabaldon into Barnes and Noble, and I approached her one day in the store, and I said, would you like to do an event here? Because she shopped at our store too, because she lived up that way. And she told me she would never do an event at Barnes and Noble because we had placed her books in the romance section. So that was the end of the conversation, because I said, well, there's not much I can do about that, but I will send a letter. Well, a number of years later, they finally did do that. And actually through Barbara, we did hold an event at the Barnes and Noble up in Scottsdale, which was a packed house. We couldn't have gotten one more person into that store.
That's what I was going to ask you. What's the biggest event you've ever done? What was your Super Bowl event?
Well, we've done events. We did events with a couple of organizations, charities that are 1,000 people, or sometimes 1,100, but about 1,000 people in some of the local hotels. And they typically bring in 3, 4, 5 authors, and we would sell the books. And we did very well in those. Actually, one brought in 8 authors a couple of years ago.
Oh my gosh. How about a single author event? Do you have any that were just absolutely off the charts?
I did an event actually with, I don't know if you remember him, Joe Garagiola from the Today Show. And he was a retired baseball player, and then became a broadcaster, then became, he was one of the people on the Today Show for quite a few years early on, I guess in the 60s or 70s. But he also came into the store at Barnes and Noble, and I know he was, so I talked to him, and he was very gregarious. And he had written a bestseller 30 years before that, now had written another book. And of course, now he was older, and very few people, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Events calling.
He couldn't really get it moving. So I said, it's spring training coming up in Arizona. Why don't we go to the ballparks? At that point, there were 8 or 9 different ballparks between here and Tucson. And we'll sell you a book there. Each stadium has 10,000 people, whatever.
Yeah.
So
That would work.
and we called around to the stadium. They were all thrilled to have him. And so we scheduled, I think it was 8 ballparks. We would go an hour or so before the game because I figured, how many books are we going to really sell? But it turns out we sell 300 or 400 books at every event. And he would sit there and sign. And in every event, I never saw an inning of a baseball game. We were still signing books at the end of the game because he wrote his name down with such precision. And he always said the nuns taught him how to, And so we did 8, even in Surprise, which had a newer ballpark. The guy just said, "Lock up when you finish," because he's not staying. And because he talked to everybody. I mean, everybody story took a picture. I mean, it was just a process, but we did sell, I think it's almost 3,500, 3,600 books.
Wow.
So that was the single most. Plus, I never heard the same. I would pick him up at his house because he lived not too far from the store, and put 300 to 400 books in the back of my car, SUV, and we'd go to the stop, and he would start to talk, and you would get a word in once in a while, but and I never heard the same story twice in all that time. Yeah, he used to kick myself that I didn't record this stuff, But because he was,
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you. A lot of authors are watching this. It sounds like storytelling is a common denominator. But what makes a good event? I mean, it's not. It's obviously you want to sell books, but what makes a good event? What makes an engaging event?
The author has to connect with the audience. I mean, when early on, people would come in and say they want to read from the book, and I said I did it a few times, and that's a killer. That's not gonna, how good. It doesn't matter how well the book is written. That is a killer, and so if the person connects, and there are some authors who are just, it's almost natural to them. Others are very, you wonder, boy, you let them alone, you won't make a sale. So
that's me. I'm that author.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's not true, but it's just making people feel comfortable and connecting to the audience on a level besides the story of the book. A lot of people show up because it's the 8th book in the series, that kind of thing. So they know the character and they have good questions. The standalone novels, it's a little harder. I personally am more interested in history as the events that I've done. And that's the books I'll read first, and literature and mysteries, will be second. But that's really it. It's just to connect with the audience and let them know that you're there to talk to them versus reading or waiting to ask questions. You always have to find something. Some people are just. The last event I did was Adriana Trigiani, and she's just a whirlwind. You just say hello and get out of the way.
They make your job easier.
Yeah.
What about the sheer logistics of it? Say first of all, I guess there has to be the decision whether it's big enough to do an in-store event or off-site.
Right.
Getting in the books, just in this, with all the shipping problems and everything lately. How are you handling the logistics of estimating how many books you'll need, for example?
That's always, yes, that's what I was saying before, how I met Barbara. She would be going to Barnes & Noble because she realized she didn't order enough books. And so it's just the best educated guess. And the offsite events, it's the ones we have history with, we know we're going to sell 3,000-4,000 books. We're not sure which author, but we know in total we're going to sell about that much. And it's just an educated guess. And again, with the pen, we have such history with so many authors, like you guys who've been before. So we have a fairly good idea. Now, of course, we're just coming back out of the pandemic now, and we're having few events. Most of them still virtual, but there are now 1 or 2 a week, more and more coming on. And so we're building back to where we were before.
I've got a question that, because I have been one of those authors who got stuck in the window and nobody showed up.
That happens.
And I've
It
also,
happens.
You start to tap dance at that point.
You meet your booksellers. It's great. You get to be buddies with your booksellers.
but looking back over the course of your career at B&N and now with the pen and everything, what does work to promote an event? What just getting the people in the door? What techniques or what methods of promotion have you seen work, and what doesn't work?
Well, just putting up a sign definitely doesn't work because most people don't read them. So you need some, and today, fortunately for today, there is social media and ways of, and the pen does a pretty good job of accumulating people when they come in who never shopped before, or even if there are a lot of tourists come into the store, let them know that we can still send them information about the events, and they can watch it on video or in virtual mode. So, but when I was at this Barnes and Noble, it was in the early days there were newspapers. We could get an event into the newspaper that highlighted it, or even in some cases that ran an ad. Especially in the beginning when we were building business. And because when I started at this store, I'd only been in business for a couple of years. But really, social media is probably the critical one right now. The papers don't really exist anymore. You can't get we're having hopefully a big event with Silver, Daniel Silver, in a couple of weeks.
I can't wait for that book.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
But we're doing that one off-site because we're expecting a large crowd. And so we have some partners because it is off-site. There's a couple of book groups that are promoting it with us. So hopefully we'll have a large crowd because historically he's done really well here. Plus we have Jayne and Gail, his wife, coming this particular event. So she's going to interview him actually.
Oh.
That's a perfect segue, because that seems to be the big trend now, is the in conversation. I know I love it as an author that I get to sit down with another author or sit down with someone from the bookstore and we do an interview and kind of a back and forth of information rather than me standing in front of a podium talking at you.
Right.
How do you like that format? Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's more engaging. Again, for people who are sitting there, because most people they want to know about the author. They want to know about, and so anytime you can get more of that kind of conversation going, rather than the book. Some books, you can talk more about the book because the character's so overwhelming, but a lot of times you just want to talk to the author, meet the author, even though, you guys come back several times and people know you, but people still come. Or in Jayne's case, he didn't come. But typically that's how it I think it's probably the best way for people to do it. So
That's great.
I mean, I've had it where 1 or 2 people show up. I've had it where I've had 60, 70 people and the author didn't show up. So,
Oh,
That's never good.
yeah.
did that really happen? What'd you do?
Well, I try to reschedule it. He was an ASU professor. I've done events with him in like salon settings at people's houses in the valley here, because I have a couple of groups that do that. And he's an astrophysicist. I mean, I never understood one word he said. But he happened to be in England, and I guess he just didn't realize. So, of course, he couldn't run over from ASU.
Yes.
And I've since done other events with him. It was just one of those flukes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, typically, it works well if you could get enough word of mouth out. But just, Barnes and Noble would have signage all over the place, but people just, a few people would come up and say, well, we're having so-and-so, but that alone wouldn't move the needle at all.
Are you only in the back office, or are you out on the floor hand selling books with everybody else?
Oh yeah, I'm selling books too with everybody else. And then just
Awesome.
the event on the side. So yeah, I interact with customers every day almost. I'm not full time, so when I'm here.
But when you're here,
Yeah.
what's your favorite book to share with people?
Well, I'll share any book that I'm reading if I'm reading it. Right now, actually, the book I just finished was a book on Jack Welch. I don't know if you remember him. He ran General Electric.
Gee.
Pretty much wound up destroyed the company, but it was fascinating read on how the whole country got so caught up in the 80s on these business gurus who everything had to be short term, and nobody in their right mind could have believed that at 15 years every quarter they made the exact numbers that they needed to make, and couldn't figure out that there was something maybe behind that he was taking from here to do that, to do this. Broke up the company and was doing it all with purchasing other companies that weren't going to make anybody happy, and they didn't. And after he left, General Electric, which was the largest outside of Enron, the largest company in the United States, was pretty much gone.
But
Broke it up, sold it.
Are those business guru books still the big thing that they used to be? For a while there was oh good, I'm glad. Do you remember that?
It's like this,
Stole my
even
cheese
self-help
and-
books aren't the same as they.
who moved my cheese?
Yeah.
The cheese book and the 1 minute manager, and they
Yeah.
were just everywhere for a while.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. That period of time, it was anybody wrote a book was going to get it published and out there. 4-hour work week or something like that. I can't.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Work Week.
Yeah.
Launched the productivity. I mean, it's funny because now, with that kind of book, it's now all of the streamers have these great shows about the unicorn business owners, the head of WeWork and, all of that. They've taken Elizabeth, the Theranos one is phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow, was it Dropout? Is that what it's called? So it's kind of the natural extension of the business book is now the business show. That's kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah, I mean, she was convicted, and I think they just convicted the other guy today. Her CEO lover.
Did they?
Yeah.
I'll have to go look. I've been working.
That's good. That's good.
I'm
good
fascinated.
gossip.
She's the model for the villain in Her Dark Lies. I don't know if I've ever told you that, Jayne.
Good little known behind the scenes factoids. Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Well,
And
random
you-
fact.
And she had some big people on her board and big people
Yes.
investing in her, and then you'd say,
Yes. Yes.
but people said the same thing too about Bezos. I mean, Amazon didn't make any money for 10 years, but people still were investing in it. And
Yeah.
it turned out to be, really good investment.
A good investment. They don't always turn out that way.
No, it's one of the rare ones where actually, people stuck with it, and he actually, the idea was solid enough. that
Built
he-
on books.
He's making rockets. So
How important, I've always been very impressed with the Poison Pen's mailing list, essentially the newsletter list and the energy and the work that goes into those newsletters every month. I've come to rely on them for book recommendations is what's
right.
Great.
worked for
Well,
me. And I'm sure,
they're a big impetus for calls that come in all the time. I read it in your book notes. I read it in your collector's corner. Absolutely, it's an important piece of the business. Yeah.
but represents a huge amount of work. Do different members of the staff take responsibility for certain sections of it now? Because it looks like more than one person could possibly.
There's several, Barbara and Patrick, and there's a few other people who are doing their part. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it really does drive a lot of business to the store. Same way the reputation for, people come in and look up all these authors, because we have the pictures along the walls. And I'm just amazed at how many authors come into the store and stop in. And people, sometimes it's almost like a pilgrimage. Some people are coming to the store from, especially in the tourist season. They're coming, they had to make a stop at the Poison Pen. They've heard so much about it. That's a fabulous legacy that Barbara started.
It is. It truly is.
Yeah.
Do you have any book recommendations for us? Did they ask you to
They
bring
didn't
fun
ask,
things for you to share?
No, they didn't.
Show and tell.
I always ask, what did you want to talk to me about? So the missing piece was the last one before the Welch book, which is really a good one by Lescarard. And that was fabulous read. So now I just started 2 Nights in Lisbon.
Oh,
Chris Pavon.
Yeah.
Is it good? I have it. I just haven't started it yet.
Yeah. So far, and actually I grabbed Mark Greeny's book because he was here last night. And when I was doing everything else, I was just reading. Not the first 4 or 5 pages grabbed me, so I might start that one after.
He's an incredible writer on such a trajectory. It's so we've been friends. He and I have been friends for a really long time. He's a Tennessee writer. We shared an agent. Just watching him just blow up is so neat. That's got to be cool as a bookseller too.
Yeah, years ago I had in the store Ron Mcclary. Okay. Now, nobody knew who Ron Mcclary was, but he was an actor on TV. He was in the early on Law and Order. He played it always judge, very distinguished looking, and he had come to New York to be a writer. And of course, he wasn't very successful, but he had a great voice. And talk about people. He started to read his book. Everybody went to sleep, but anyway, he had a great voice, and so he became an actor, and he made a very good living at it. He told me, and he also did voiceovers. He read books on tape, also, and he did that for years. And he finally went to the publisher because after 10 books, he hadn't sold one of them. He went to the publisher and said, "Well, you got it. I want something that people know I was here. So I want to do books on tape." And they said, "Okay, we'll do one, but you got to read 2 more for free." So he has a book on tape now, the last book. And it gets into their catalog. Stephen King is driving around Maine. Who knows? He listens to books on tape. He listens to Ron's book called something about scissors. I can't remember what it was. And writes this incredible review in Publishers Weekly about the best book you're never going to read. So he went to look for the book, you couldn't find it. Viking gives him $1 million contract for 2 books. Ron Mcclary, after being rejected for 15 years. And he writes 2 books, but then that was it. Neither one of them sold. But that was one of the best stories I was involved with. And he came to the store, actually came to the store with the second book too, but. So.
Is there anything Uncle Stevie can't do? That's what we call him around here. We call him Uncle Stevie. I've never met him. I would love to, but I mean, he is kind of the godfather of the community, isn't he? If he anoints you, Stephen King, if he anoints
Oh,
you.
yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, one of a good little blurb from, but that was I read the article and it was really was a great review of the book. I read the book. I think that, you know, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't. I didn't think it was that. No reason the first 10 were rejected.
It's.
But he was a really good actor.
He found his talent.
Yeah.
I think sometimes for authors who they'll get it right once, but they honestly don't know what they did right that time and they can't duplicate it. It's a sad sort of thing. If in the business you see somebody who has a one-off and it's just everybody goes for it and then they can't they don't really know what they did right. You know, it was all intuitive, it's all instinctive and hard to.
And then you
hard
try to
recreate.
recreate it and it just, you can't
Yeah.
recreate it because you don't know what you did.
You know,
Well,
Magic.
I think
Sad.
people refer to it as a craft, you know, and like any craft, you have to hone it. And
Yeah. yeah.
But
Relying on it.
you guys write, and you write by yourself, and it's got to be lonely because there's nobody bouncing these until you finish. You don't really have any feedback to your work, right?
Not really. Some writers do get into critique groups, you know, and groups, and they'll have other close writer friends, and they'll share it. I've never been able to do that. I don't until the book comes together. It's in no shape for anybody else to look at. So I can't take advantage of that.
Yeah,
But
but it's
either
not,
way.
it's not the only business. I mean, lots of businesses, people have one idea and that's it. Second idea doesn't work.
Well, you know what? Brings us to a good question because you've been on the front lines for big business and you have watched the implosion of the book market.
Mhm.
What did the big bookstores do wrong? What happened with Borders and Walden's
B.
and-
Dalton and Walden Books and
There was a time in this country when you could not walk through a shopping mall without stumbling over a B. Dalton's and a Walden's books.
Right.
All gone, all gone.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't think Barnes and Noble really did anything wrong. They might have overbuilt a little bit, expanded too fast. But I think it's just the general public, or you know, it's a niche market to begin with. What 35% of the people read on a regular basis, if that much.
Yeah.
And the younger generation, I can't imagine what it would look like if it wasn't for J.K. Rowling developing 2 generations, you know. So I think there's a lot of hope there, but I think it's just the general public, you know, especially younger people, that went to the Kindle or other. I mean, I don't know how people read on their phone, but people do. You know, at least they say they do. You know?
if I'm stuck out somewhere, I will read on my phone. I can totally do it.
Well, I mean, I'll read the New York. I have the Times, and I'll read the paper, you know, because I'm not reading. I'm just seeing what the headlines are and stuff. But people to read a novel or a nonfiction book, not being able to go back, and so I mean, I just hope Barnes and Noble, you know, continues to make it, because yeah, we do, and Amazon, you know, of course, killed a lot of bookstores. It just, you know, I lived in Westport when Connecticut. And there were, Main Street ran only 3 or 4 blocks off the post road. And each block had a bookstore. One of them there for like 30 some years called the Pink House. You know, it was just an old house that you know, you couldn't even walk through it because there were just books everywhere. And, but then Barnes and Noble came in on the post road. I think it was in '94, the first time I'd seen a, you know, a Barnes and Noble, like, you know, the big ones. And within the year, they were all 3 stores were gone.
Yeah.
And then Amazon did the same thing to pretty much the Barnes and Noble by just undercutting them. And, you know, even today, I'm not sure. I know now they're profitable in the book business, but they weren't for 6, 8 years. They didn't make any money at all. But he put a lot of smaller stores out of business who lived off the, you know, bestseller list and that kind of. And when they went to the 30% discount, that just did it for a lot of stores. But, you know, there are stores around, you know, independents, you find them have little niches. Look, you know, it's like, we have nonfiction books here, and we have cooking and we have sci-fi and kids, but smaller sections. So even though we're a niche for mysteries and thrillers and just general fiction, we do try to present the community with more stuff and the ability to get more stuff, especially since now this area is just, there's building everywhere here, residential buildings. So a big influx of people in the future here. So.
Well, that's, I mean, that's a really good point, because I think that is part of what the pen brings to the conversation, so to speak. I mean, y'all are not just the bestsellers. You have this massive depth of books. You've got massive knowledge in the depth of your booksellers. I mean, it's just such a unique store. Do you feel like it started as a niche and now it's broadened out, and that's why it can compete? Because y'all are, you know, competing quite well in the market.
Yeah, it definitely evolved and has evolved from what I was told the store was like when it first opened. And the thing about Barbara, she does let people, I mean, like I bring in some books for the nonfiction section, the history section, and other people bring in books that they want for the sci-fi section or the teen. So there is that flexibility, and we do offer more, and becoming more of a community bookstore than and we do sit between two existing Barnes and Noble, both 10 minutes either way. But so often people will say, you know, I just want to buy from a local independent bookstore. And it's in Phoenix, there's 2, 3. So
I think there's also a sense of curating. You curate in a way that the big stores can't. You know, the chains have other kinds of business approaches, but the Poison Pen has, as you say, Barbara, has allowed the individual best booksellers to take responsibility or help fill out certain areas of the shelves. You said your area was kind of history and nonfiction.
yeah, more so than, I mean, we have some really great people who do the fiction books. And so, you know, I sort of focus more on that in terms of when I find a book that I want to recommend. We're highlighting our staff picks more than we've done in the past. So people come in and see a whole section of just a variety of books that we're reading. You know. So
I like that. As a shopper, I like those staff picks.
Yeah.
That's the first place I go. Yeah, I go past that front table and I go and look. You know, we've got Parnassus here in Nashville, and that's the, you know, you come in and on the left-hand side, there's this big wall of what everybody's reading. And I mean, that's, you know, you get to be friends with the booksellers and you trust what they say is great. You know, it's fantastic.
Yeah, you get it a lot. And I think that's one of the reasons people come into a smaller independent bookstore than the bigger ones. That, you know, I don't think they did it anymore. From what I've read, talked to a few people. People, the publishers bought that first section of Barnes and Noble where you walk in and you see all of the books that are new and whatever. Those were put in there by the publishers.
I
heard that
used to
they're
try
not
to
doing
explain that to people and they
Yeah.
couldn't grasp it at all.
Yeah.
They kept that secret, really a secret, even though it was an open secret in the business. Customers never realized it.
Yeah, and so, coming into a smaller store, you have more chance, first of all, talking to you. In Barnes and Noble, I was in the back room, so I didn't really interact that often with customers. But people, especially later on, it became, you had no time to do, you could point them someplace, if you're looking for something, but to get into a conversation with them about a book would be near impossible for staff.
Yeah. Have you been hit with the TikTok influence yet? Have you had find yourself ordering any books because of TikTok, which has become a thing in a few places?
I haven't, so I haven't seen any that have been recommended in the store that way, but I would have to ask some of the other booksellers who are much more social media savvy than I.
I don't know how many history books are like ripping it up on Book Talk right now. Though I bet, there would have been plenty if this phenomenon had started earlier, like with Eric Larson. I bet Splendid in the Vial would have been a massive, TikTok sensation.
Yeah, it's still a good seller. All of his books still are. I mean, we still sell all of his books. But again, there's limited space in that area. Because if you remember the store, those sections actually roll. That's the limited space. But there's a certain vibe when people come into the store. There, it's like you see, take a look around, seeing the store, what's in the store. And people do come, they just browse.
And I guess that is something that you couldn't do in the big chains because it was too much. It was overwhelming. You didn't browse the way you do in a smaller store.
Yeah. Well, and Barnes and Noble for a long time, they went toys and gifts
and strange shelving. I mean, Diana's a good example of, they shelved her in the wrong spot. My thrillers were in fiction and literature.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah, they still are. I mean, it's like, okay, it makes no sense. Nobody knew where to put me either. Yeah. So that, you at least in a indie store, a little more intimate.
Yeah. And it was the same way for the staff. I mean, people not knowing where somebody's book would be. But again, I just hope this is wood. I don't know if this is wood.
Yeah. Let's all knock.
They survive. But, you never have enough bookstores.
No,
but,
we need more. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you were as a business with a business background that you have, if you were advising someone on how to start up a bookstore, because a lot of people dream of doing that.
It's amazing, right?
What would you tell them?
I'm not sure I would recommend it, but if I was going to recommend it, I tell them to really focus on a particular niche that would draw people to your store. What would make it different? There's a little store I've seen because my niece moved to a little town in Pennsylvania, and it's a cute little bookstore, similar, almost actually a little bigger than ours. And it's just a general bookstore because it's Barnes and Noble's not going to put a bookstore in that town, but they have one in Lancaster, which is not that far away. But it's a good mix, and it focuses really on children, because gets their parents in, and hopefully that generates some business. And they have readings and children's hours and stuff like that. And that's one of the things I thought about here was when I first came, maybe a regular Saturday reading, but it takes too much of the store. It would take up too much of the store.
Mhm.
It's like even when we have an event, we pretty much in the afternoon start to close down the store so we can put up seats and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if I was to recommend somebody to go into that business, it would definitely have to. There has to be a reason why people want to walk into the store.
A destination
If
store.
Huh?
A destination store. You go there. Like,
Yeah.
like there used to be a little store down here that did nothing but architecture books on architecture. And it was oddly fascinating, even for those of us who didn't study architecture. But people would shop there from, architects, and people in the business would shop there because there was nowhere else they were going to see these beautiful,
Right.
these books, and it became a destination.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
but
so
Seattle's
cool.
a big enough town to
Yes,
support that.
yes.
Yeah.
You were there on the front lines when the pandemic hit, and you saw the Poison Pen really have to devote itself to mail order.
Mhm.
What was that process?
Revamping events entirely.
Well,
Not
a
entirely.
lot of our business is mail order. I mean,
Was it before the
Normally.
event? Before?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Normally, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a significant part of the business because I think our back room is bigger than the store, actually.
It is huge.
Yeah.
Big.
There's a lot of books back there.
Yeah. And so, and when we do these events, we sell more books online than we would in the store typically.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. No, the reputation is incredible about the Poison Pen, and people, our email list and newsletter list is huge. We try to capture everybody who walks into the store to give us their email. They'll say, well, I don't live there. I said, well, we ship all over the world. So,
How have the events have changed? Obviously, you're now doing so many virtual. How many did you do a week prior to the pandemic versus now?
well, I just came a little before that, but I was always told we did about 200 or more a year,
200 here.
even when they were they were all live.
Yeah.
Now we couldn't do what we do now, which is 2 in the same night.
I know,
Or
it's
3
like
the same
600 a
day.
year now. I mean, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. But I was always told that the store did about 200 so a year. And I could see it when I first came here, that which is one of the reasons Barnes & Noble, again, we weren't getting those, because if they were doing an independent bookstore in Phoenix, it would, in all likelihood, be here. So I had to be very creative in terms of making events up and things like that, finding little niches away from typical author signing and author event. So, but they're out there. I mean, if you go and look, you'll find, especially today. I mean, everybody's written a book. I might be the only person.
Yeah, there's plenty to choose from.
Are you going to write one? Are you going to write one, Larry?
No, actually, my nephew's getting married, and his wife has written the book, and so I'm in the process of reading that. Okay, it's hard because the audience is YA, and so it's not exactly. But it's her first book, and she's a really bright young woman, so I figured I would give it a try and see, squeeze her in someplace to. But everybody wants to write a book. I mean, you don't, not finding an audience for bookstores in general, but everybody wants to write one. Well, I think they have something to, and everybody has a story, so I guess it's true.
Maybe it's from the old, maybe it's the way that in the old days, it used to be fairly traditional to keep a journal, you know, basically a diary of some sort. That's been around for, you know, hundreds of years. And maybe this is our modern era's version of that kind of journaling process.
Well, also, I think you see it advertised now. You can, you know,
Yes.
say, we'll publish your book and we'll do this, we'll do that, and that, all that stuff, and then you're a published author.
But all of which means there's a lot more product, literally product on the market. And that's what makes it so hard to shop for books. I think a lot of people must just get overwhelmed trying to choose one book, you know, out of all the gazillions that are out there. And that's, I swear, I get more mileage out of a post on my Facebook page that leads to something like top 10 thrillers of the month, you know, something that curates it, something that cuts down the sheer numbers than I do on anything else. People are looking for that kind of curating.
Yeah, it's the publishers have lost some of that because, like you said, there's so many other people putting stuff out on the market. And so it's hard, you know, if you come into the store, people don't know where to, if you're not, haven't been reading, if you're a first time reader, yeah, it's scary to find what it is you like. But again, I think if you don't capture somebody early on as a reader, you're not gonna get them, you know, when they're 40 or 50. Maybe, possibly, but very, very minute numbers. Because you watch people come into the store, and this isn't, I don't want to talk about anybody, but you'll see couples come in, because the largest percentage of buyers are women, and readers are women. You'll see men wonder, like, they wouldn't touch a book. Their life depended on it. The women come in to buy the books, the men, you know, it's like, where do I put my hands? You know, it's like, pick up a book, look and see. You might, but you know, that's, again, I think if you get kids to read, which I think what Raleigh did was terrific.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who can read, given in our population, most people could read if they wanted to, or do read when they have to, like online or an instruction manual or you know, but I don't think everybody got the gift of being able to read for pleasure. The older I get, the more I'm convinced that that's just not a universal thing. We can watch a TV, most of us can watch a visual story, or, you know, and that goes back to watching plays and things like that. And the audiobooks certainly cover another market there, because most of us are able to listen to a story and enjoy it. But to read it is, I don't think, as natural an experience as those of us who do read assume, or should be. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, my feeling is, if you've got a failed reader or someone who's not interested in books, you've just not found the thing that they're interested in reading. You know, so many, and my brothers are a great example. Neither one of them are readers, because they had to read certain things in school and they were just, you know, bored out of their minds. And so they just, you know, they didn't become readers. It just wasn't their thing.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's to me anyway, it's always, the book is just an experience, you know, to read it and to get into it. Which, you're right, some people, I mean, when I was running a business and more active, I read less. I just didn't have time. Although I travel a lot, so that was easy. I just always took a book with me, you know. And I was traveling from Connecticut to Hong Kong and Singapore, so I had plenty of time to read. But most people don't at that, you know, at that period in their life, and they're, you know, working, especially now, people seem to work all the time. It's like not like a 9-to-5 job now. People just are constantly, and they're constantly on their phone. You know, you just don't see people who, it's almost like, you know, if it's in their hand, that's it. So they're always on the phone.
I blame Sesame Street. Jumpy, jumpy, jumpy. Can't be quiet. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Oh, no offense. I didn't mean
Yeah, be careful, or you're gonna get yourself in trouble with that one.
Big Bird will come after me. I'm doomed. Yeah.
Oscar the Grouch and Jay.
I think they, you know, they survive and it'll survive. I don't think it's going to go away. I mean, and
It's,
people
you
are
know-
very, people are, lots of people do want to open bookstores, and I think enough people will find a niche, find a market, because smaller stores are so much more adaptable than the big box stores, and people always, like I said before, they always come and say, I'd rather buy from you than, even though we may have the book and we have to order it, you know, and we're not giving them the 20% discount that Amazon does or whatever, you know. That a lot of people just write out, I hate Amazon, I'm not buying from Amazon. So that will, you know, allow people to find niches, find markets that are underserved or not served at all. I mean, think about it, this is the 5th largest city in the country. And I count on my hand the number of bookstores. I don't even need all my fingers, I think, for independent bookstores. So, it's just surprising, it really is.
Entrepreneurs out there, if you're listening, this is your chance. We need more bookstores. We need them well run, though. We need smart bookstores.
Yeah.
That's-
But
I'll
you know,
watch this series Behind the Pen and learn how to do it.
Yes.
yeah, well, you know, there are enough readers out there and people who want these kinds of stores to exist. And but it is again, it's a niche market. I mean, you know, 100% people who eat, you know, they don't read. So, and I don't know about schools now, what kids are, I know what they're reading, but if they have this, they're reading off of devices or they're reading off of, besides, you know, schools are they buying books now, or
I don't know.
I don't know.
libraries are having problems of their own, you know, so it's a tough world for books, but you know, I'm sure they're going to exist some format.
Well, as has often been observed, it is ultimately the most perfect way of preserving knowledge.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that can last for hundreds of years. The tech today isn't going to last for hundreds of years. So,
Well, also, how do you go find it? I mean, I for a couple of years lived in the 42nd Street Library in New York. I was writing a master's paper, and I mean, that was just incredible. There wasn't anything you couldn't find or get, you know. And then on your device, how do you know, you can Google anything now, I guess. But if you have a book and you want to find a page or whatever, you know, it's not the same thing as picking up a book and looking at the index and the chapters over and finding something you're looking for. So
the discovery thing.
but I think stores are going to continue to exist. People want that. Enough people want that. And like I said, I think there's new generations coming of readers. And hopefully, you know, it continues the way it's been.
Well,
There was a surge for a while about small independents were coming back, but then the pandemic, I think, probably did a lot of them in. But I haven't seen one here in this town. And there's, I mean, there are people moving here all the time, more and more people. So you'd think it would have to be. I mean, if it was for Barnes and Noble, I don't think there'd be a bookstore on the west side of town here. You know, and that's a lot of people.
Wow.
well, the Poison
Larry,
Pen
this is so
doing its-
cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. We've just had a great time doing this series.
I know.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
I think when they're all put together in, you know, in one location, it'll be an interesting way of, well, for one thing, it's an interesting way of doing meet the staff. You really get to know the staff through these.
Well, now I'm not able to hide.
Now they're gonna have to put a bio on the website for you.
I do have to admit, though, the very rarely do we get those kind of calls about, you know, yesterday happened to be one of them, but where very colorful language was directed at us. But most of the people that we deal with, most of our customers, whatever, it's always a very pleasant, even if we're late on a book or, you know, send it to Chicago instead of Chattanooga or whatever. They're very understanding. They're, you know, it's a nice group of people.
It's that, well, because the store has a way of establishing a personal relationship with the customers, and that's magic.
With the
Yeah.
customers, with the authors, you know, obviously with each other, you guys have a camaraderie and a respect for one another that just comes through so clearly, everyone we speak with.
Yes.
Well, there's a few exceptions to that.
Don't tell.
Devotion to the store, let's put it that way. There's a lot of devotion to the store, and everybody seems to have a lot of interest in the actual customers, which is pretty
Mhm.
nice.
And the
Speaking,
act of bookselling.
yeah,
Yeah, well, you know, customers come first, you know, so. And if they're in the store, hopefully they're in for a reason and want to buy a book. So, yeah.
put the right one in their hands. Thank you
Yeah,
so
no,
much for
it's-
joining us. This has been fabulous. It's really a thrill to talk to everybody connected to the pen. It's played an important part in our lives, hasn't it, JT? I mean,
It really has. It really has. It's been illuminating, and it's started some very lovely friendships, which is a huge bonus.
yes.
It's terrific. Thank you. Yeah, it's a wonderful experience to be here. It really is. And, so, I mean, I enjoyed it.
Oh, well, we had a great time. If you're out there watching, this is the end of our series, this discussion today with bookseller Larry Siegel at the Poison Pen in Scottsdale, Arizona. And if you've got questions, just contact the Poison Pen. They can answer any questions you have about books, and they do a fabulous job with mail order.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
Most of it
Bye,
gets to the
Larry.
right place too.
Oh,